Mark Holloway stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, adjusting his tie for the third time. The crisp white shirt and navy suit couldn't mask the guilt etched across his face. He splashed cold water on his cheeks, trying to wash away the shame, but it clung to him like a second skin. "Honey, are you almost ready?" Sarah's voice drifted through the door, pulling him back to reality. "We'll be late for the Johnsons' anniversary party." "Just a minute," Mark called back, his voice steadier than he felt. He stepped out of the bathroom to find Sarah waiting, resplendent in a form-fitting black dress that accentuated her curves. Even after 15 years of marriage, the sight of her still took his breath away. Her honey blonde hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her green eyes sparkled with warmth. "You look beautiful," he said, meaning every word. Sarah smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thanks. You clean up pretty well yourself." As they drove to the party, an uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Mark's fingers tapped an erratic rhythm on the steering wheel, his mind racing. He'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times, but now that the moment had arrived, words failed him. "Sarah, we need to talk," he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned to him, one eyebrow raised. "Now? We're almost at the party." Mark pulled the car over to the side of the road, ignoring the angry honk from the vehicle behind them. He killed the engine and turned to face his wife. "I can't go on like this," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I've been seeing someone else." Sarah's face remained impassive, but her knuckles turned white as she gripped her clutch. "How long?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. 6 months, Mark admitted, unable to meet her gaze. "I see." Two simple words, but they cut through him like a knife. "And you're telling me this now because—" Mark took a deep breath. This was the moment he'd been dreading. "I want to try an open marriage." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's face cycled through a range of emotions: shock, hurt, anger, before settling into an unsettling blankness. "You want an open marriage," she repeated slowly, as if tasting each word. "So you can keep seeing her without feeling guilty?" "It's not just about her," Mark protested weakly. "I love you, Sarah. I don't want to lose you, but I can't deny these feelings, these desires. I thought if we opened up our marriage, we could both explore without consequences?" Sarah interrupted, her voice razor sharp. "You get to have your cake and eat it too?" Mark flinched at her tone. "That's not what I meant. I thought it could be good for both of us. A chance to rediscover ourselves, to bring some excitement back into our lives." Sarah laughed, a hollow sound that sent chills down Mark's spine. "Excitement? Is that what you call betraying 15 years of marriage?" "Sarah, please," Mark pleaded. "I'm trying to be honest here, to find a way forward for us." She turned away from him, staring out the window at the darkening sky. For a long moment she said nothing, and Mark felt his heart hammering in his chest. Finally Sarah spoke, her voice so soft he had to strain to hear it. "Okay." "Okay," Mark repeated, not daring to believe it. Sarah turned back to him, her eyes glinting with something he couldn't quite read. "You want an open marriage? Fine, let's do it. But remember, Mark, this was your idea. Whatever happens, you asked for this." Relief flooded through Mark, mixed with a twinge of unease at her words. But he pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the fact that she hadn't left him, that there was still hope for them. "Thank you," he said, reaching for her hand. "I promise we'll figure this out together." Sarah pulled her hand away, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We should get to the party. We're already late." As Mark started the car and pulled back onto the road, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd done it. He'd confessed, and Sarah had agreed to try. Everything would work out now, he told himself. But as they drove in silence towards the Johnsons' house, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just opened a door he might not be able to close. The weeks following Mark's confession passed in a blur of tense silences and awkward conversations. The Holloway household, once a haven of warmth and laughter, now felt like a minefield, with both Mark and Sarah tiptoeing around each other, afraid to set off an explosion. Mark sat at the kitchen table one Saturday morning, nursing a cup of coffee and scrolling through his phone. He glanced up as Sarah entered, her hair tousled from sleep, wearing an oversized t-shirt he didn't recognize. "Morning," he mumbled, trying to sound casual. Sarah grunted in response, making a beeline for the coffee maker. As she reached for a mug, Mark noticed a small bruise on her neck. His stomach clenched. "Late night?" he asked, aiming for nonchalance but missing by a mile. Sarah turned, her eyes challenging. Does it matter? Mark swallowed hard. I guess not. I didn't hear you come in. I was quiet, she said, pouring her coffee. Didn't want to wake you. The unspoken words hung heavy in the air, like you do when you sneak in after seeing her. Mark cleared his throat. So, any plans for today? Sarah shrugged, leaning against the counter. Might go out later. You? Work stuff, Mark lied. In truth, he had plans to meet Amber, the woman he'd been seeing. But admitting that felt wrong, even though this open marriage had been his idea. Sarah nodded, her face impassive. Well, don't let me keep you. She turned to leave, but Mark called out, Sarah, wait. Can we talk? She paused in the doorway, not turning around. About what? About this, us. How are you doing with all of this? Sarah laughed at a bitter sound that made Mark wince. How am I doing? Let's see. My husband of 15 years cheated on me, then asked for an open marriage to ease his conscience. How do you think I'm doing, Mark? Mark stood, moving towards her. I know it's been tough, but I mean, you seemed okay with it. You've been going out, seeing other people. Sarah whirled to face him, her eyes blazing. Because that's what you wanted. You opened this door, Mark. You don't get to complain about the draft now. I'm not complaining, Mark protested. I just want to make sure you're okay. I'm fine, Sarah snapped. Absolutely peachy. Is that what you want to hear? Mark ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. No, I want the truth. I want us to be honest with each other. Honest? Sarah's voice dripped with sarcasm. Like you were honest about your affair for 6 months? The words hit Mark like a physical blow. I made a mistake, he said quietly. I'm trying to make it right. Sarah's laugh was hollow. By sleeping with other women guilt-free? How noble of you. That's not fair, Mark protested. You agreed to this arrangement. You're seeing other people too. Yes, I am, Sarah said, her voice suddenly calm. And you know what? I'm enjoying it. More than I ever thought I would. Mark felt a twist in his gut at her words. What does that mean? Sarah's smile was cold. It means I'm discovering things about myself, Mark. Things I never knew when I was busy being the perfect, faithful wife. It's liberating. She turned to leave again, but Mark caught her arm. Sarah, please. I love you. I don't want to lose you. For a moment, Sarah's face softened, and Mark saw a glimmer of the woman he'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But then the mask slipped back into place. You should have thought of that before, she said quietly, pulling her arm free. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have plans to make. Mark watched helplessly as she walked away, the distance between them feeling greater than ever. He sank back into his chair, the reality of his situation crashing down on him. He had pushed for this open marriage, convinced it was the solution to his guilt, a way to have everything he wanted. But as he sat alone in the kitchen, listening to Sarah move about upstairs, Mark began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. The open door he had so eagerly pushed for now felt like a gaping wound, and he had no idea how to close it. As summer faded into autumn, the Holloway household settled into an uneasy rhythm. Mark and Sarah orbited each other like wary planets, their paths crossing briefly in the mornings and evenings, but rarely intersecting for long. On a crisp Friday evening, Mark arrived home earlier than usual. He'd canceled his plans with Amber, feeling a growing unease about their relationship. As he stepped into the house, the sound of laughter drifted from the living room. Sarah? He called out, setting down his briefcase. The laughter abruptly ceased. Mark rounded the corner to find Sarah curled up on the couch, a glass of wine in hand. Beside her sat a man Mark had never seen before. Tall, athletic, with a chiseled jawline that belonged on a movie poster. Oh, you're home early, Sarah said, her voice slightly slurred. Mark, this is Jake. Jake, my husband Mark. Jake stood, extending a hand. Nice to meet you, man. Sarah's told me all about you. Mark shook Jake's hand mechanically, his mind reeling. Has she now? Sarah's smile was sharp. Only the good parts, honey. Don't worry. An awkward silence descended. Jake glanced between them, clearly sensing the tension. I should probably get going, he said, reaching for his jacket. You don't have to leave on my account, Mark said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Sarah stood, swaying slightly. No, it's fine. Jake has an early morning anyway, don't you? Jake nodded, looking relieved. Yeah, gym session at 6 a.m. Gotta keep in shape, you know? As Sarah walked Jake to the door, Mark retreated to the kitchen, his hands shaking as he poured himself a generous measure of whiskey. He heard the front door close, followed by Sarah's unsteady footsteps. Well, that was fun, she said, leaning against the doorframe. Nothing like introducing your husband to your date. Mark knocked back his drink, wincing at the burn. Date? I thought we agreed to keep things discreet. Sarah laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. Oh, like you've been so discreet with Amber? Please. That's different, Mark protested weakly. How? Sarah demanded, her eyes flashing. Because you're a man? Because you started this whole thing? Mark slammed his glass down on the counter. Because I'm not parading her around our home. Because I'm not throwing it in your face. No, you just sneak around behind my back, Sarah shot back. At least I'm honest about what I'm doing. Honest? Mark scoffed. Is that what you call bringing strange men into our house? Sarah's face hardened. Jake isn't strange. He's kind and funny, and he makes me feel alive. When was the last time you did that, Mark? The words hit him like a physical blow. Sarah, No, she cut him off. You don't get to play the victim here. You wanted this open marriage. You got it. Deal with it. She turned to leave, but Mark caught her arm. Is this really what you want? To hurt me? For a moment, Sarah's mask slipped, and Mark saw the pain and vulnerability beneath. But then it was gone, replaced by a cold determination. What I want, she said quietly, is to feel something again. Anything. Even if it's with someone who isn't you. She pulled away, leaving Mark alone in the kitchen. He heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the slam of their bedroom door. Mechanically, he poured another drink, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The open marriage was meant to save their relationship, not destroy it. But as Mark stood in the silent kitchen, the scent of Jake's cologne still lingering in the air, he realized he might have miscalculated badly. He thought of Amber, of the excitement and passion of their affair. It all seemed hollow now, a pale imitation of what he once had with Sarah. But had he realized it too late? Mark sank into a chair, his head in his hands. The open door he had so eagerly pushed for now felt like a chasm, growing wider with each passing day. And for the first time, he truly understood the magnitude of what he stood to lose. As the clock ticked relentlessly forward, Mark sat alone, grappling with a sickening realization. In his quest for excitement and freedom, he might have destroyed the one thing that truly mattered. Weeks blurred into months, and the Holloway household became a battleground of passive aggression and barely concealed resentment. Mark found himself spending more nights at the office, unable to bear the sight of Sarah getting ready for another date. When he was home, the tension was palpable, hanging in the air like a toxic cloud. One chilly Saturday morning, Mark stumbled downstairs, his head pounding from another night of drowning his sorrows. He froze at the bottom of the stairs, confronted by a sight that made his stomach churn. A man he'd never seen before was in the kitchen, wearing nothing but boxers, rummaging through their fridge. The stranger looked up, a piece of toast hanging from his mouth. Oh, hey, man, he said casually, as if this was perfectly normal. You must be Mark. I'm Carlos. There any milk left? Mark stared, speechless, as Carlos poured himself a glass of orange juice instead. The sound of footsteps on the stairs jolted him back to reality. Sarah appeared, wrapped in her silk robe, her hair disheveled. She took in the scene before her, her eyes flicking between Mark and Carlos. Well, she said, her voice dripping with false cheerfulness. This is cozy. Mark found his voice at last. Sarah, can I talk to you, privately? Sarah sighed dramatically. Carlos, honey, would you mind giving us a minute? Carlos shrugged, grabbing his juice. Sure thing. I'll be upstairs. As soon as Carlos was out of earshot, Mark rounded on Sarah. What the hell is this? Sarah's eyes narrowed. This is exactly what you wanted, isn't it? An open marriage? I didn't want this, Mark gesticulated wildly. Strange men in our kitchen, eating our food. Oh? Sarah's voice was dangerously calm. And what did you want, Mark? To have your fun while I sat at home like a good little wife? Mark ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. Of course not. But this parade of men, Sarah, it's too much. Sarah laughed, the sound brittle and harsh. Too much? That's rich, coming from you. How many times have you been with Amber this week? Twice? 3 times? Mark flinched. He hadn't seen Amber in weeks, but Sarah had no way of knowing that. That's different, he protested weakly. How? Sarah demanded. Because you're a man? Because you started this whole thing? Explain it to me, Mark, because I'm having trouble understanding the double standard here. Mark's anger deflated, leaving him feeling hollow. I didn't think it would be like this. Sarah's face softened for a moment, a flicker of the woman he'd fallen in love with shining through. What did you think it would be like? I don't know, Mark admitted. I thought I thought we'd both have some fun, maybe spice things up. I didn't think You didn't think I'd actually do it, Sarah finished for him. You didn't think I'd find other men attractive, that they'd find me attractive? Mark's silence was answer enough. Sarah shook her head, her expression hardening again. Well, surprise, Mark. Turns out there are plenty of men out there who appreciate what you've been taking for granted. The words stung more than Mark wanted to admit. Sarah, please, can't we go back? Close this door we've opened? For a moment, hope flared in Mark's chest as Sarah seemed to consider his words. But then she straightened, her face a mask of indifference. No, Mark, we can't go back. You opened this door, and now we both have to live with the consequences. She turned to leave, but Mark caught her arm. Sarah, wait. I love you. I don't want to lose you. Sarah looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and resignation. You should have thought of that before you decided to have your cake and eat it, too. She pulled away, heading back upstairs where Carlos waited. Mark stood alone in the kitchen, the weight of his choices crushing down on him. He had pushed for this open marriage, convinced it was the solution to his restlessness, a way to have everything he wanted. But as he listened to Sarah's laughter drifting down from their bedroom, Mark realized he had made a catastrophic miscalculation. The open door he had so eagerly pushed for now felt like a gaping wound, and he had no idea how to close it. Worse, he was beginning to suspect that even if he could, the damage might already be irreparable. As he sank into a chair, his head in his hands, Mark Holloway faced the sickening possibility that in his quest for excitement and freedom, he might have destroyed the one thing that truly mattered, his marriage and the love of the woman he now realized he couldn't live without. As winter settled over the city, the Holloway house grew colder in more ways than one. Mark and Sarah's interactions had devolved into a series of curt exchanges and icy silences. The revolving door of Sarah's dates continued, each new face a fresh blow to Mark's crumbling ego. On a frigid Friday evening, Mark trudged up the driveway, his breath fogging in the air. He'd spent the last few hours at a bar, nursing a whiskey and wallowing in self-pity. As he fumbled with his keys, the front door swung open. Sarah stood there, dressed to the nines in a slinky black dress that hugged her curves. Her hair was styled in elegant waves, her makeup flawless. For a moment, Mark forgot to breathe. You're in my way, Sarah said flatly, breaking the spell. Mark stepped aside, words failing him. A sleek sports car pulled up, its engine purring. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a handsome face Mark vaguely recognized from Sarah's social media. Ready to go, beautiful? The man called out. Sarah brushed past Mark without a backward glance. Be right there, Jason. As she climbed into the passenger seat, Mark found his voice. Where are you going? Sarah paused, one foot still on the driveway. Not that it's any of your business, but Jason's taking me to the charity gala at the Ritz. The charity gala? The one they used to attend together every year. The one where they'd shared their first dance as a married couple. Sarah, wait, Mark pleaded. Can we talk, please? For a moment, Sarah hesitated. But then Jason revved the engine impatiently, and her expression hardened. I'm done talking, Mark. Enjoy your evening. The car peeled away, leaving Mark alone in the driveway, the echo of squealing tires matching the screech in his mind. He stumbled into the house, anger and despair warring within him. The sight of Sarah's discarded outfits on their bed, sent him over the edge. With a roar of frustration, he swept everything off the dresser, perfume bottles and picture frames shattering on the floor. As he stood there, chest heaving, his eyes fell on a framed photo that had survived his outburst. It was from their honeymoon, Sarah laughing as Mark kissed her cheek, both of them sun-kissed and deliriously happy. The sight of it broke something inside him. Mark sank to the floor, cradling the photo, tears streaming down his face. How had they gone from that to this? How had his desire for excitement and novelty led to this hollowed-out version of their life? Hours passed as Mark sat there, lost in memories and regrets. The sound of the front door opening jolted him back to reality. He scrambled to his feet, hope and dread warring in his chest. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her perfect makeup smudged, her hair slightly disheveled. She took in the scene, the broken glass, the scattered clothes, Mark's tear-stained face, with a raised eyebrow. "What happened here?" she asked, her voice devoid of emotion. Mark took a deep breath. "Sarah, we need to talk. Really talk." She sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "About what, Mark? Haven't we said it all by now?" "No," Mark said firmly. "We haven't. We've been talking at each other, not to each other, and I can't do this anymore." Something flickered in Sarah's eyes. Fear? Hope? Before she masked it. "Can't do what?" "This," Mark gestured between them. "This open marriage. It's killing us, Sarah. Killing what we had." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "What we had? You mean the marriage you were so eager to open up? The one you cheated on?" The word stung, but Mark pressed on. "I know. I messed up. I made a horrible mistake. And then I made an even bigger one trying to fix it. But Sarah, please. I love you. Only you. I want to close this door we opened. I want us back." For a long moment, Sarah said nothing, her face unreadable. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "It's too late, Mark," she said softly. "You can't just decide to close the door when you don't like what's coming through it anymore. It doesn't work that way." "Why not?" Mark demanded, desperation creeping into his voice. "We can fix this, Sarah. We can go to counseling, work on our marriage. Please, just give us a chance." Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "A chance? Like the chance I gave you when I agreed to this open marriage? The chance you threw away when you decided our vows weren't enough?" Each word was a dagger to Mark's heart. He reached for her, but she stepped back. "No, Mark," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't do this anymore either. I can't keep pretending that what we had still exists. It's gone. You killed it, and I helped bury it." She turned to leave, but Mark called out, "Sarah, wait. What are you saying?" Sarah paused in the doorway, not turning around. "I'm saying it's over, Mark. I want a divorce." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Mark felt the floor drop out from under him, his world tilting on its axis. "Sarah, please," he whispered. "Don't do this. I love you." She glanced back, her eyes filled with a mixture of pain and resolve. "Sometimes love isn't enough. Good night, Mark." As Sarah's footsteps faded down the hall, Mark sank to the floor once more, surrounded by the wreckage of their relationship. The open door he had so eagerly pushed for had become a chasm, swallowing everything he held dear. And as the first light of dawn crept through the window, Mark Holloway faced the crushing realization that his quest for excitement and freedom had cost him the one thing he now knew he couldn't live without: the love of the woman walking away from him, perhaps for good. The weeks following Sarah's declaration of divorce were a blur of legal meetings, heated arguments, and sleepless nights. Mark moved out of their home, unable to bear the emptiness of the rooms they once shared. He found himself in a small, sterile apartment, surrounded by boxes he couldn't bring himself to unpack. On a dreary Sunday afternoon, Mark sat at his kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers before him. His signature was the only thing missing, the final nail in the coffin of their marriage. As he picked up the pen, his phone buzzed with a text from Amber. "Hey, stranger. Haven't heard from you in a while. Everything okay?" Mark stared at the message, a wave of revulsion washing over him. He deleted the text without replying, then blocked Amber's number. It was too little, too late, but it felt like the right thing to do. Just as he was about to sign the papers, a knock at the door startled him. He opened it to find Sarah standing there, looking as beautiful and unreachable as ever. "Sarah?" he said, surprise evident in his voice. What are you doing here?" She held up a small box. "I found some of your things while I was packing. Thought you might want them." Mark stepped aside to let her in, his heart racing. Sarah's eyes fell on the divorce papers on the table, and something flickered across her face. Regret? Pain? Before she masked it. "I see you're about to make it official," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Mark nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Sarah set the box down and turned to leave, but Mark caught her arm. "Sarah, wait," he said. "Can we talk? Really talk?" She hesitated, then nodded. They sat at the table, the unsigned divorce papers between them like a chasm. Mark took a deep breath. "I know I've said this before, but I am so sorry. For everything. The affair, pushing for the open marriage, all of it. I was selfish and stupid, and I hurt the one person I never wanted to hurt." Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Why, Mark? Why wasn't I enough?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "You were always enough, Sarah. More than enough. I was the one who wasn't enough. I got scared. Scared of settling. Scared of missing out. But I realize now that what I had with you was everything I ever needed." Sarah wiped away a tear. "Then why did you throw it away?" Mark shook his head, self-loathing evident in his voice. "Because I was an idiot. Because I thought the grass might be greener on the other side. But Sarah, there is no other side. There's just you. It's always been you." For a long moment, Sarah said nothing. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. "I'm not innocent in all this either, Mark. I could have fought harder for us. Instead, I let my anger and hurt push me into the arms of other men. I thought I was punishing you, but I was only punishing myself." Mark squeezed her hand. "Where do we go from here, Sarah? Is there any chance for us?" Sarah's eyes fell on the divorce papers. With her free hand, she pushed them aside. "I don't know, Mark. We've hurt each other so much. But I still love you. God help me, I still love you." Hope bloomed in Mark's chest, fragile but persistent. "I love you too, Sarah. More than ever. And if you're willing, I want to fight for us. Real counseling, real work on our relationship. No more open doors, no more games. Just you and me, trying to rebuild what we had." Sarah's smile was watery but genuine. "It won't be easy. We've both changed, and there's so much trust to rebuild." Mark nodded. "I know, but you're worth it, Sarah. We're worth it. If you'll have me, I promise to spend the rest of my life making this right." Sarah stood, pulling Mark to his feet. She cupped his face in her hands, searching his eyes. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her, because she leaned in and kissed him softly. When they parted, Sarah whispered, "Okay, let's try." As they embraced, both crying and laughing, Mark felt the weight of the past year lifting. The open door that had caused so much pain was finally closing, but a new one was opening. One that led to healing, forgiveness, and a love stronger than before. Mark Holloway had learned the hard way that the grass isn't greener on the other side. It's greenest where you water it. And as he held Sarah in his arms, he silently vowed to never take her or their love for granted again. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but for the first time in months, Mark felt hope. With Sarah by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next, grateful for the second chance to get it right.